Well, welcome everyone to our Brainstorms May podcast, and we have a very special show for you today. I'm really, really excited about it. We're here in our beautiful studios, the Sycamore Studios in Plain City, and our guest, a very famous singer-songwriter, is joining us from Austin, Texas. And I know that everyone will be very interested in his story, in his journey, and in his philosophy, which is exceptionally healing. At the end of this particular podcast, he's actually going to be playing the entire theme songs to Brainstorms. And you hear it at the beginning, and you hear it somewhat at the end. And people who attended the movie of the same name, Brainstorms, it was a Julie Pacino written and directed movie that showed what the chaos was, the storm was within the veteran's brain. And Tim, sight unseen, not knowing me at all, wrote the most appropriate, compassionate, healing song I've ever listened to, and that's the truth. And without, further hesitation, I'm turning you over to Mr. Tim Baechle, who will be telling us a little bit about his story today. And welcome, Tim. Thanks so much.
Hi, Chrisanne. Well, thanks very much, and thanks for your humbling comments.
Those are absolutely true. Absolutely true.
It's so nice. And I'm grateful to be part of this, and I'm grateful that you're in my life and how we came together. It's been you're like a tsunami that's swirled in, and all of a sudden, boom, and it's an absolute blessing.
Well, I agree as far as you're concerned. I'm not sure. There's two kinds of people who, welcome me into their world, and people who batten down the hatches and kind of hide. So you're in the more fearless category for sure. Why don't you tell the folks in our audience a little bit how we met? Because it was an amazing meeting that occurred on a 911 Zoom, right? I mean, we were September 11th. We were Zooming, and this all came out, right?
Yeah, and you reminded me about this the other day. We caught up. We were on a business call.
Yes.
And we were talking about doing some stuff with your nonprofit. Right. And I was helping the company out, as I do. I consult for companies around the world. And at the end of that call, I don't even know what you said. I don't know in a Zoom you said, "Hey, do you write songs or something to that regard?"
Well, I noticed you had this beautiful guitar above your head. And, at that point in time, we were getting ready to film Brainstorms. We didn't have a theme song. I desperately wanted one, and I did. I mean, it just kind of came to me from the universe. Ask this random person if he happened to be a singer-songwriter, right?
Yeah, it's such a bizarre question and timing of that. I was like, yeah, I think I said, yeah, I do. But I don't think, that's kind of one of those accidental magic type of things in life.
Yes. It really was. Well, the thing, I thought you came back and you said, why did you ask me that? And I said, well, you've got a guitar above your head. And you go, well, why didn't you ask me if I was a guitar player? And I do remember my response, because it also came from the universe. I said, because I don't need a guitar player. I need a singer-songwriter. And it was really true. And then to go on, and you're exceptionally humble. I don't know if you're going to tell our audience, you had the #1 hit in the world that you wrote. You've written for, I'll let you go ahead and start, like how many different people you've written for on the planet that are still singing your songs, right?
Yeah, music, getting into music was completely accidental and something that I never intended to do.
Okay.
Music has always been part of my life. I took piano for a good chunk of my life, and then my teacher moved to Czech Republic, and I was devastated because she was amazing. She was super cool, and she taught me all of the classical music. And then she also let me play rock and roll, boogie woogie, and the Beatles and different things. So I was very excited about it. And when she moved, I told my mom that I was going to take up guitar. And she said, well, all right, well, if you want to take up guitar, you need to buy one. We grew up in a different time period where your parents didn't give you everything.
Right, yeah.
So I scrapped up some money and bought a guitar and taught myself how to play, and I think I wrote a song in first week.
Oh, I thought.
And I was writing music since I was like 15, 16, And I was in Ireland, and I have a friend that's a producer, a big producer for some of the largest bands in the world, like U2, Stones, and he masters a lot of records. And I was sitting in his studio, and I just was playing, and I was just playing a throwaway song.
Okay.
I didn't think anything of it, and then I got a phone call. I don't remember how long after it was, from somebody in London saying they wanted to buy a song. I'm like, what song? And they told me it's a song. I said, how did you get that? And they said, hey, Andrew sent it to us. And I'm like, Andrew from Dublin? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, why would you want to buy that song? It's garbage.
Oh,
And they said, well,
you haven't written any of that. Okay, go ahead.
No, I have. And trust me, I have tons of garbage and and loads of it. So they said, well, they're starting this boy band, and these were big, huge producers. And I'm like, when is a boy band? And they said, we're going to, and none of them play instruments, and we're going to put this together, and then we're going to, we'll arrange it, and we'll send it to you so you can hear it. So I said, yeah, sure, whatever. I'll send you the song. And so I showed him the song. And so Gary Barlow and Robbie Williams ended up being in that part of the band. I didn't know any of these people. At the time, they weren't anybody. And then the song went to number one in the UK, Ireland, Australia, and the rest of the world. And I remember walking into a pub, I think it was in London, and everybody was screaming. It was playing over the speakers, and people were screaming it and singing it. I'm like, this is the weirdest thing in the world. And that was kind of my foray into the music industry.
An interesting foray when your garbage song ends up number one in the world by one of the most successful, boy bands. I mean, David Gray, John Mayer, Robbie Williams. These are all people that you've written for. And just recently, when we were actually talking last week, I pointed out to you that in the New York Times bestseller, "The Many Lives of Mama Love," she's listening to your song. At one point she says, in order to get through I listened to songs by, John Mayer and Robbie Williams. So at book club the other day, I said, I happen to know that composer. I said, he's so creative. And I know that you use some of your music as both therapeutic because of things that have occurred in your journey, as well as enlightenment. You say you kind of write songs for your girls to kind of direct them in various ways without being really preachy, right?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't listen to my own music. I never have. I think when I've written songs and sold songs, I've never played them ever again, and I don't listen to it ever again. And it's kind of throw it away.
Wow.
But for myself, be it John, Amos, David, whoever it may be, I don't think I've ever played those songs ever again in my life. And been in many stages and just don't want to play those because there's throwaways. But for me, music's always been like a therapy, almost like a ponderance in regards to spiritual for me, a place to go where I could speak aloud with my true self and my thoughts to get things out that maybe in a setting I couldn't say things that were on my mind. Yeah, so it was a way to be authentically me and I think I accidentally found myself doing that, of just saying things in music that I felt inside, and realized that I was directing emotions through music.
Right.
And they just came out. And I find playing music and even listening to music, it's very spiritual. And over time, through observations or tragedy or pain or excitement or great things, songs just pop out. And somewhere there's meaning in there. There's meaning for me, at least. And it's funny because I've heard musicians say, of songs of mine that, I wrote the song. Well, they didn't write that song. People say this all the time when they're in interviews, because most of the time they're not writing this music.
Right.
And, or it's kind of like going to an art gallery and people ponder a piece of art and say, I think the artist was thinking this, when they painted this. And it's all a load of bollocks because they don't know what. And behind the scene, for me, it's great to have people interpret whatever they want it to interpret it, whatever that means to. And I don't mean to leave things vague. I'm very intentional in the way I talk, but for people to find a meaning in it for themselves or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's very blunt.
Right. Well, what I didn't know, but something inside of me intuitively knew, is that your story actually made you the perfect singer-songwriter for our veterans with traumatic brain injuries, with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I had no idea of that when I really asked you to do it. I just, like I said, it was one of those, I consider it when the other world kind of comes here and says, ask this question, this is the person that you really want to do this. So I know you are one of the most compassionate, definitely oriented toward resurrection and salvation and bringing people back and helping them on their journey. But could you tell us a little bit what got you started down a very long journey, right? Of, that inner chaos in your brain, that hurricane in your brain that was taking you away from things that you really could find as healthy. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
From a TBI standpoint?
Yeah, from your TBI standpoint. Well, let's start there.
Yeah, sure. Well, originally I set off to be a Catholic priest when I went to university, so my head was, from a very young age, that kind of was wired to be in the service to others. And then I went down a diversion path, and I played soccer in college, and I took some really hard knocks, major, like 10 concussions, and fractured my skull was by the first knock. And probably I needed those knocks. I think my head and my brain said, hey, you probably need that. But I always said, God slaps you in the head, said, hey, you probably need that one there, take that, So, and then I ended up working for the government, and there was an explosion, and had another one. And at the time, no one knew what this was all about. So when you told me about what you were doing, I'm like, this is fascinating. Yeah. Because I had all these things in my head that were happening, that had happened to me, that no one really understood, from feeling like I was underwater, the noise in my head, just the kind of the overwhelming sense of emotions, pain, kind of almost like you're stuck, really just stuck.
Yeah.
And I went down a dark path of alcoholism, and it was for, I kind of, our family has that genetic propensity to do that. And this may sound stupid, but I was really had controlled chaos, that I needed to go down all the way to the very bottom of what my rock bottom was going to be. Mm-hmm. And everybody around you just say, hey, you're an alcoholic. It's like, yeah, look, I know this. This is not something I don't accept. But I needed to go through the atonement and knowing myself of what that point was, to touch the bottom, to bounce back up again and put my head above the surface. I knew where that was. Yeah. And those were some crazy, crazy, crazy times. And then when I found that hope and way to save my own life, I started to resolve the things that were in my head that were causing me this pain, not just from a TBI, but from alcoholism, that it wasn't the drink I was attracted to, but all the other chaos that I've been through, and trauma, to work my way out of it, to understand it, and to say, okay, this is it. Once I found that, it was like a switch flipped.
Right. But you had, some therapies along the way. I know that for your personal journey, they weren't as helpful as they are for some of our veterans, but you also had friends who were around you and very concerned about your condition, more so than you were, correct?
Oh, absolutely. My friends, I had great friends, and they were like family, and they were always on me and taking me places, taking me to hospital. Yeah. I had a friend, I think I talked to you about it. He had a traumatic brain injury. He was a very famous painter.
Right.
You and I spoke about him, an incredible guy. Who was around me, who helped me through so much to find my way back to survival. Another friend who's my best mate in the world, Guy mate, my wife's my best mate, but who lives back in Scotland now. And he's always on my side. He's been on my side at the points where I literally was at the precipice of death, and he just happened to be there.
Wow.
And that's another non-accidental thing, right. Multiple times. And we talk about it. I talk to him every week. I see him multiple times a year as well. And about, remember the time, and he was very upset, not at me, but over the situation.
Right.
And through that conversations that we have today, after decade plus of looking through things, I think it's therapy for both of us. In some way, we saved each other's life.
We had talked about the fact that, again, hands-on treatment, like hands-on, people literally caring about you, taking you to the hospital, taking you to perhaps AA meetings or whatever, it is so much better than, calling a number where you have a volunteer hearing about you for the first time who has X amount of minutes, to try to figure out what to do. I mean, your friends had staying power, and I think that speaks a lot to you and to the value that they saw, in your spirit. And so many of our veterans have their comrades are several states away, or, they're having the same issues themselves. We don't do a good job here, I don't believe, in our communities to bring people in and around them, to give them that hands-on. And the friendships are those that occurred in war, and then everybody scatters, You're quite the traveler, so you go back to Scotland. We don't have young veterans who are able to do that. So, I think whatever advice we can give them is, stick with the people, find people in your community, stick with the people, if you've got to meet them on Zoom, if you've got to meet them on a long telephonic call, let them be with you on that journey. Would that be a fair assessment, or?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to call any time of day, wherever they are, and just talk.
Yeah.
You don't have to ask for help, and just talk. I would do that all the time. And then there's people, and I had people in my own family that you said, I don't call me ever again. And so, but I think when you're prepared for that, or understand that, or know that is possible, you can, if you ready yourself, you kind of ready yourself for battle kind of thing, you're going to know that that's a possible outcome.
Yeah.
So if I think about, when I talk to you, I think about people that served in the military or who were deployed overseas. They were wired for that type of strategy.
Right.
That they certainly can reach out to people, even though if they're states away or whatever it may be, because I think one of the things that we get into a path of in life when we're spiraling down through a traumatic brain injury or through an addiction, alcoholism, whatever it may be, is that we get a feeling that no one understands us except ourselves. And it couldn't be further from the truth, but we do this isolationism.
Exactly, which is horrible. You're right, exactly. And so many of our veterans don't want to burden anybody. Like, they don't want to burden their family and tell their family about it. They don't want their spouse, their children, their parents to know what they went through. And, just keeping it all inside is not healthy in any regard, right?
No. And it's not talking about, I look at those events in my life as the most important and greatest experiences of my life and accomplishments I've ever been through. No accolades, songs, awards, ever are even in consideration for overcoming those events. And, what you said about family want to talk about things, but what I found too is that they want to talk, like, hey, tell me about what happened.
Right.
And then they go, I don't want to hear what happened. It's too much for them.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And it is
like they have you're not trauma dumping on them, but you're like, well, you asked, and I'm telling you my story because I'm comfortable with sharing it, and this is like excessive for you. Like, they have I've got overflow system. Like, well, it's way too much. I don't need to know that. Like, why not? Is there not enough love and compassion to take it all in?
Right. Exactly. So. And I've listened to many stories, and I will tell you, I mean, in my former life, I worked as an ER doc, and I was in an inner city, emergency room, trauma center. Like, horrific things came through there. Hatchets in people's heads, the gunshot wounds. Nothing I did there prepared me for the least of the stories that I've heard from our veterans, because you're talking of war zone, you're talking of continual, bombardment of hatred and, weaponry and so far away from home. Nothing even comes close to that, right? And you've seen that in your government job. You got to see firsthand a lot of the war-torn areas, right? You grew up in one, right?
I grew up in one, and then my first assignment was in South America, and before that country completely was demolished. So all over the world, 150 countries, some of the craziest places you'd ever been. Some places no human being should ever go or would ever go.
Right.
And those are kind of the things that you're walking through life and you're taking pictures with your eyes. And you're taking it in. You can't believe what is going on with mankind, and you're just witnessing it. But those things don't go away. You just kind of process them.
Exactly. I think you really, a couple things. We know that somebody with a traumatic brain injury, 80% in some studies, 47% is the least amount of statistic that they give people who have some addiction because of it. And basically, you've got two kinds of brains. You've got the kind that's too overstimulated, like you had so much noise in your head. You were trying to drown that noise with alcohol. So many of our young folks are from the different military bases are literally, addicted to opiates when they leave there because they've been given opiates to soldier on, warrior on. So that's I had the exact opposite issue. And again, I always explain to the audience, I never compare my brain injury to someone like you or to someone who worked in explosions like that. Mine was purely being a klutz putting up Christmas decorations. But that being said, my brain was so dead that I became so addicted to caffeine. Like it was, those high energy drinks and, get me some more coffee and get me some more chocolate. And with your Irish background, we share our Irish heritage for sure. We know that those of us who I was craving the milk chocolate because that's in our genetics. The flip side of that, if you're trying to drown it, is alcohol. And the same receptors that are under fire when you're taking the milk chocolate become the alcohol receptors, and the people who are craving dark chocolate then become opiate addicts. So there's that genetic component that kind of precedes the injury and the trauma as well. So,
yeah, but you said your story. To me, my story doesn't. You said your story doesn't compare to my story, and I disagree. I think everybody has a story, and it's as equally as important to anybody else's story. No story is better than another story. Everybody's story is different. But what's kind of similar is the journey is the same because the pain's the same, the hurt's the same, the anguish the same, the misunderstanding from others is the same.
Very true.
Trying to find the light to get out is the same. The struggle is the same, and the yearning to find that space. I said to you one time that I had to work hard to reconnect my heart to my brain, and I think
was a beautiful statement.
Everybody that goes through that probably feels that way, trying to identify with it. So there's nobody's story that is better. That I'm not a one-upper.
No, I just say mine wasn't a very honorable story.
I
wasn't in a place of honor. Seriously,
your life has been magnificent.
Well, it was a life that could have ended right there, and a couple times after that. And one of the things we had talked about too, when we talk about this theme of brainstorms, that's what I really felt like was going on inside my head. Like I could not get control of anything, and when you talked about that rock bottom, we had discussed previously about the fact that I consider the brainstorm like a hurricane, and it's swirling around until you go through like the first eye wall, and you're just in that quiet space. When you were saying, okay, now I've got to dig back out the other side of that hurricane in order to get out of there. So when I get young men or women who call me in desperation, and I have a cell phone that's unlisted, Tim, and I've had desperation suicide threat calls from 29 states of veterans, which shows us that we are not getting this problem under control well enough by any manner of means. And that's what I tell them. I go, okay, you're right now in that eye. Let's be quiet. Tell me your story. I'll be on the phone as long as it takes. And if you need to recharge and tell me more tomorrow, that's fine. We can do that. But when you get settled, grab a hold of me and strap on, because we've got to get clear out the other side of that driveway. It is not an easy recovery by any manner of means. And what were some of the obstacles you noted in that recovery process?
Well, you're like the Mother Teresa of TBI in the work you do. I don't know how you do it. And it really is remarkable. I tell my wife that all the time of who you are, and what you do with your life, and the work that you do. I think the obstacles for me, probably the same for everybody, was figure out how to solve it and settle my brain down. Mm-hmm. And then identify what was happening and what causes things to happen, overstimulation, how to get myself still. And interestingly enough, I'll be 51 this year. That's not the interesting part, but I've learned to be really still, like sit in complete silence. I was always on the move my entire life.
Yeah.
And that calm allowed me to calm myself and understand myself like I'd never understood anything in the world. Right. And because of that, I can understand people better, because it made me look deeply inside myself and reflect, which I do every single day, to then work externally, and it calmed me as a person. So that timing helped me overcome obstacles that come along the way. If I have episodic events where I'm overstimulated or whatever it may be, those experiences along the way help me kind of just go, okay, sit tight is what we're doing today. We're just going to sit in silence.
Right. And we have several veterans, some who will be on a program in the future here, a podcast in the future about transcendental meditation, Christian meditation, mindfulness, just doing that. I know another thing that you and I talked about, and I talk about it a lot in my book, that literally without my belief in a higher power, without my belief in Christianity, without my belief that there is a God that's going to help me, I do not believe I could have come out of that, because there was nobody around me who was able to do that. I mean, when you're an apex kind of caregiver, when you go down, there's nobody around there. Yeah. Everybody's mad that you've been taken out of commission here because they've got things to do. So it was very different. And when a priest that I know said, "Do you know what the Aramaic for prayer is? It's to set a trap. Sit there. Don't be asking for this. Don't be asking. Sit there and listen. Listen to what God will tell you, and you will be able to work your way out." And it really made all the difference in the world. It really did make a difference. And I know you believe in that kind of higher power to help get out as well.
I do. And, through the journey, I never lost my faith.
Right.
I wondered if he lost his faith, as you go along the path. Mm-hmm. But I remember very distinctly my mate, I guess in Scotland, my best mate, was always by my side. We would get on our knees and pray in my condo in downtown Austin. And wow. It'd be weird hours, just together, like, "Hey, let's get down on our knees and pray," he would say. Mm-hmm. He's Catholic, and I'm Catholic. And it was like, I remember the first time he did it, I'm like, this is incredible. It was like powerful. And Patrick did it too, and we would go to Mass together as friends. Mm. And but the power of the Holy Spirit is a powerful thing, and for me, I felt very, very comforted by that. Right. That I could sit and listen to maybe words that I needed to listen to, or listen to my own thoughts, or prayers that I needed to send up. Never asking for anything, but wondering how I could be better.
Yeah. One of the more interesting stories that I'd heard, because I didn't know as much about Buddhism. I have read some things. I mean, I still don't. I mean, it's an amazing practice for sure. But I was really struck by a medic in the Battle of Fallujah. And we're talking, the Battle of Fallujah is by all standards one of the worst conflict, multi-day battles in the history of humanity. And he was nonstop for 3 days there, just dragging bodies out of there and trying to stop bleeding, trying to find severed limbs. I mean, it was incredible. And I said, how did you make it through that? He says, when it got to be too bad, I would take myself out. I said, take yourself out where? Like, were you able to leave the theater? He says, no. I would sit there and I would meditate and I would pray and then I would come back refreshed. And I'm there like, that is control. I mean, that is really control of the situation. And so many of us, particularly in our Western cultures, more Western, don't have that, just like you said, that ability to slow down, to stop and stay still and try to regroup, right?
Yeah. And, I have friends that are younger than me and older than me, and they gave me some incredible advice that I still remember through the years, and some of it was harsh. And we talk about it all the time. I'll say, do you remember when you told me this? No. Mm-hmm. And I said, it impacted my life like you wouldn't believe.
Wow.
Like made me stop dead in my tracks, turn left, and then move in a completely different direction. And I don't think people realize the impact of something, of such a loving, deep friendship and strong words can make on somebody's life, because it's not coming from a place of hurt. It's coming from a place of love, saying, hey, do you wear this?
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I wanted to show, if I can, I've got to show, literally, there's my Irish grandfather's baby grand piano is a treasure, and this is my second treasure in my home, and it is the FedEx delivery of your handwritten lyrics to Brainstorms that were written on 11/12/2020. I got it on 11/14/2020. And it was really not until looking at these and listening to your words that we will, be playing in a few moments here, that I sat there and says, oh my word, this man has been where our veterans are. I want to bring up the one, I walk the halls and I climb the walls. I mean, where did that come from? Experience, right?
Yeah, all of this song is really my life, and also a mesh with the stories of soldiers' lives. I had many friends that were soldiers too that I knew in my life, and then understanding our conversations and brainstorms together. But my life is in the song, but walking the halls and climbing the walls, I did that constantly. And I'm sure a lot of people with TBI have done that.
Correct. They can't sleep. Sleep disturbance is one of the number one, side effects, consequences of a brain that's disconnected, for sure. I mean, I climbed the wall. So, I mean, I sat there and all I thought is, I'm glad I didn't know this ahead of time. I would have never said, please take yourself back there, and write this song so that we can bring others up to where you are. But it was, I drank everything in sight and swallowed all I can find. You're just looking for something else to be the answer, right?
What that part is, I never did narcotics, so I was trying to mesh that in regards to people that coming back from war, that would fall into the trap of pills and an 8-ball, drugs and 38 and bit of suicide and that sort of thing. So those lyrics are from personal, probably, observations rather than my own life.
The other thing I thought that was just kind of miraculous about, this whole thing, I really do believe that there's, divine hands in things. We met on September 11th on 911. We talked about this, and then when you you called me first and sang the song. And of course, I started crying with the first lines, from Baghdad to Basra, from Boston to Bakersfield, because you did not know at that time. But one of the veterans that we founded Resurrecting Lives Foundation for, Staff Sergeant Brian Piercy, grew up just near there, just outside of Bakersfield. And they're like, he too had his hand in this particular healing, prayerful song. And when you got down to the part that said, I found hope in the most peculiar place. Tell me a little bit, like, where did that come from? Both the hope and the phrase, both the hope and the phrase.
Well, I think hope, if I dwell on the word hope, it's kind of like the word love.
Okay.
If we're in search of it, we find it. Like, I met my wife in a grocery store, and she talked to me. And in regards to hope, it's kind of the same thing. A stranger walks up to you in the most bizarre situation and just says something to you that completely changes your life or saves your life. And I used to do a lot of walking in the rain and finding peace, and I've run across people in the middle of the night in downtown Austin. I think I found a lot of hope. I don't know if I have time for this, but I can share it with you.
Please do. Yeah, that was one of the stories I was hoping you would share.
Yeah, so I was, and I found hope not in something else to say, but the fact that I could be of service, and it kind of turned my watch. So I'd be out walking around in the middle of the night down Austin, pouring down rain, walking through Republic Square, which is a tiny little park, literally in between 4th and 5th Street, and there was this guy sitting there in a suit. And so I walked up to him, and he's hands in his head, and he's got a briefcase behind his feet. And I said, "You're right, mate." And he's like, looks up at me, and he's been crying. His eyes on his face is completely, just all puffed up. And he goes, "I lost my job." I said, "When did you lose your job?" And he told me the time. It was like in the afternoon. And at this time, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And he's got 4 kids, and I have to go home and tell my wife I don't know how to do that. And I was out walking because I was having my own deal going on. So I sat down and talked to him and said, "Everything's going to be okay." And he told me, I hope so. And I said, "Well, have you been drinking?" He says, "No, I just been sitting here crying because I didn't want him to drive and drink, or drink and drive." And he went home and told his wife. And then one day I ran into him on the street, and his life is okay. But that gave me hope.
That you were of service. You were of service to someone, even in your desperate situation. You were able to reach out.
Yeah, and I reflected on it. Yeah. But I've had a lot of people like that too. People that were my hope, that were there for me. It's kind of like going to a funeral, and the people you think were going to be there, they don't show up, and all of a sudden people show up and go, "Why? I didn't know you'd be here." Like somebody completely obscure, and you're just blown away and touched. And that's the hope in a peculiar place.
Yes. That's amazing. Okay, so we're going to get ready to play the whole song. This is such a treat because I listened to you, and there was an excellent video on YouTube channel. You can be found everywhere, by the way. Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. And your spelling, which people will see on the podcast, the Baechle, is very different than the American pronunciation for Baechle. You know what I mean? So I didn't want people to look in the wrong place, but I want our veterans to go and listen to your songs. I find them very healing. I watch the video that Julie Pacino and her company, God bless you for flying out to LA on your own dime, spending 11 times you sang that song. I can't believe you still have fingers that are left after playing it, but I would literally love to have our audience explore all of your music.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, was it 11 times? I didn't. I didn't
It
even
was
know.
either 11 or 14. I'm not sure which, but I mean,
Uh,
it was no less than 11. And you
Yeah,
said that,
Julie and that team, they're amazing
yeah.
people. I love them to bits.
Oh, I absolutely do too. And we were very blessed that the actors that they picked for the movie Brainstorms, which to our audience out there shows, like I said, the chaos going on, the brainstorm inside a veteran's head and how he gets himself out of that. And everybody pushed themselves to the limit. We had our Resurrecting Life Foundation help sponsor them. We had a very limited budget. They did very good with it. And actually, last year, as I told you, because we were playing, your video for that, won the GI Film Festival short film and Best Actor as well, Lawrence Adamora. So it really speaks to the fact that people do relate, whether it be sports, whether it be an accident, whether it be war, to what that chaos in the brain is all about. And I will tell you, there is many a day that I listen to your song, and not once have I been able to see it without getting teary-eyed. Not once have I been able to hear it. It's absolutely moving.
That's why I'm getting a check in the mail. Thanks.
Oh, you're not getting a large enough one, that's for sure. I don't care what it is, it's not large enough, that's for sure.
Yes, buddy.
So what guitar do you have with you today?
I've got I don't know, I've got about 8 here.
Okay, all right. Which one are you gonna?
I'll play this one. I'm gonna take one earpiece out.
Okay.
So I'm gonna just tuck this. Let me know if you can hear me okay.
Okay, well, what I'm going to say is we're going to close out with this because I don't want any voiceover of mine to dampen the mood that this song will do. So, listening audience, get yourself settled, be quiet, and listen to someone who's been in your shoes. And music is one of the ways that he's, worked his way out. So I won't say more. Whatever you want to say, the floor is all yours from now till the end of the podcast, Mr. Baechle.
I'll say thank you to you and thanks to Steve. But thank you for coming into my life and being part of my life. You are, like I said in the beginning, you're an absolute blessing and you make my life better. And I'm so glad that you're my friend and somehow God put you in my path. You're an amazing person, and the work that you do is so admirable. And I think about it and I talk about you every day. My wife knows who you are and always
Kimberly's wonderful. She really is. Yeah. I mean, she was so good to let you go and do this and go to this dark space. And it was around Thanksgiving. Like if you 11, 14, it was right around Thanksgiving. I said, "Oh man, I hope he makes it out." Out of this depth that I put him in.
Thanksgiving for us is not a big deal because of. I didn't grow up at Thanksgiving.
Oh, so, I see. That's right. It wasn't. It's not big in South America where you were, or South Africa is where you were born, right?
South Africa, yeah.
Yeah, and then Ireland. Gotcha. Okay, the floor's all yours, Mr. Baechle.
All right, we'll give this a go.
Thank you.
From Baghdad to Basra, to Boston to Bakersfield, the hottest battle I ever fought is raging inside of me. My brain has been battered, scrambled and rattled. No one knows what's going on with me. I've walked the halls and I've climbed the walls, drank everything inside and swallowed all I could find. Look for stronger things to calm my weary mind, but that 8-ball and 38 won't save my life. 'Cause I have brainstorms, I have rainstorms, and I can't wait till that morning light comes. Found hope in the most peculiar place. By the grace of God, I'm still in the human race. Broke free from this broken brain. Restore my will, re-found my faith. 'Cause I had brainstorms, I had rainstorms, but now I can't wait till that morning light shines.
Thinking about harming yourself or attempting suicide, tell someone who can help right away. Call 911 for emergency services. Go to the nearest hospital emergency room. Call or text 988 to connect with the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. This podcast is made possible thanks to a grant from the Overwatch Alliance, and it's produced by the Resurrecting Lives Foundation at the Sycamore Studio. Music is written, performed, and graciously provided by Tim Baechle. Remember, when you work toward brain injury recovery, it is best to journey with a friend and keep your gait steady and your spirit strong. Finally, always seek shelter from your storms.
From Baghdad to Basra, the Boston, the Bakersfield, the hottest battle I ever fought is raging inside of me. My brain has been battered, scrambled and rattled, and no one knows what's going on